Yes, my video is back. Oh, good. Thank you ever so much, Brian, and thank you all our speakers this afternoon. As with this morning and as with the lightning demonstrations, I think we've had an avalanche of really interesting information, some really challenging ideas, and I think we've hopefully we've shown a light into into some of the issues which make this I actually believe a really interesting place to be working at the moment, a really interesting profession to be involved in. And so, excuse me, that brings us to our concluding session of the afternoon. We now hand over to the eAssessment Association, a professional group that I'm proud to have been involved with the starting quite a few years ago now. In fact, fair to say I probably had considerably more hair than this when we started. Been involved. It's a wonderful organisation run and supported by its members, responsible for the eAssessment awards, international, across all sectors. But to tell us more about the eAssessment Association, tell us more about the eAssessment Association awards, I'm now going to hand over to Teresa Jacobs, chair member of the eAssessment Association, and her colleagues who will take us through the final session. So I'm now looking, yes, we can see their screen. So I will step back and hand over to Teresa. Thank you ever so much. And hopefully you'll enjoy this session as much as the others we've had today.
Yeah, thank you very, very much for the warm introduction. And I actually remember you once saying to me when I was elected to the assessment, I think about 5 years ago, you said, Teresa, never lose your enthusiasm. So hopefully I haven't. It's a great pleasure to be here for this final session. Unfortunately, apropos losing things, I am actually going to have to be incognito for this session because the technology has let me down and I don't have a camera, but I'm not here for my looks anyway. And I can't get my screen to move.
We are seeing your slides, Teresa. Maybe you can come out of presentation mode.
Yeah, I'm not able to move the slide. That is my issue. I'm unable to move my slides.
Yeah, if you come out of presentation mode, you should be able to just run it in PowerPoint.
Oh dear, not a good one. No, completely frozen. So
Teresa, should one of us share the slides?
I think that's going to have to. That's the only way because I can't even get the slides to move. I'm terribly sorry here.
Yeah, Rebecca, if you have the slides, go ahead and share.
I don't think, I don't know if Gavin might have them queued up already, or I can just open them very quickly. Apologies, just a moment. Oh, there we go.
All right, we're seeing Gavin's share. And Gavin, you can advance, correct? There we go. We're advancing.
Super, super. Thank you ever so much. Okay, so about the EEA, We're a not-for-profit membership body with the three major goals: to provide professional support, facilitate debate and discussions, such as we've heard today at Beyond Multiple Choice, for everyone involved in this field of assessment, and in particular, technologically enabled assessment. Our second aim is to create and communicate the positive contributions that technology makes to all forms of assessment. And thirdly, to develop statements of good practice for suppliers and indeed consumers of the assessment technology. Take me to the next one. So we have 16 board members, 20 sponsors overall, and let's go to the next slide. So I won't insult you by reading out for you the activities that have taken place between January and 2020. I'll let the numbers speak for themselves, but I think you can see generally we're a very busy, very active group, and we are always interested in additional members joining us, and indeed we are completely free to join and to take part in. Let's move on. Particularly pertinent at the moment is the eAssessment Awards, which I think in some ways is the high point of the Assessment Association. We have 8 categories decided this year by 20 independent judges. And what we do is celebrate the diverse and innovative field of the assessment, and generally its impact across the globe. This year, 2021, we've actually had more entries from overseas than we've had from the UK. And actually, now I'm going to confess why I'm incognito. It's my pleasure to be a judge on the awards this year. And in case you entered and you haven't been shortlisted, at least you won't know who I am and blame me. So we've got the lifetime contribution every year, best use of formative assessment, which the last year's winner was Alpha Plus. And it's our pleasure that this year that we now have Alpha Plus to give you a very swift overview of that award-winning entry. And then secondly, our speaker from Newcastle University was our winner of summative assessment. And then other very popular categories include the Innovation Award, Best Transformation Award, Best Research, and Excellence in Export as a category last year, no longer a category this year. So thank you for that. And as always, it is upon us to be very grateful to our many and numerous sponsors whom we rely on, and for their continued support. Good. So without further ado, it's my pleasure now to introduce Gavin Reynaud of Alpha Plus, who, as I said, was the winner of Best Formative Assessment. And at that point, we'll then hand over immediately to Dr. Rebecca Gill and her colleague Jack Ennis from Newcastle University, the winners of Best Summative Assessment. Over to you, Gavin. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Teresa. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give a whistle-stop tour of our work in Wales, where we provide national school assessments for learners in year 2 to year 9 in Welsh schools. And we entered and won, as Teresa said, the formative assessment category. So first of all, not to wish to patronise anyone, but just in case you're not quite sure where Wales is on the map, it's one of the 4 UK nations, and we have a slightly complex sort of political setup in the UK, and education is one of the devolved matters that is devolved to Wales's own government. And so they have a separate education system to that runs in England. with about 15 or 1600 schools, of whom approximately a quarter teach in Welsh, and there's about 450,000 learners in those schools, of about whom 260,000 are covered by the requirement for national assessments. And also it's important to realise that Welsh language is protected in law, and Wales is a bilingual country where people are on the sort of language continuum, where they may be fully fluent in English with almost no command of Welsh, fully fluent in Welsh and not fully fluent in English, surprising that you may find that, or they may be anywhere in between. And so education reflects that in that it has multiple strands of education. They also have a very ambitious programme of curriculum reform, and parallel to that, they have been reforming their assessment approach, and in particular, picking up on the use of on-demand and computer adaptive assessment to ensure that assessment is well targeted to the needs of each learner. So their vision for our assessment programme was to replace all of their existing paper tests with assessments that function better as formative instruments, providing specific and action-based feedback to the learner, and reduce the teacher workload in both administering and marking the tests, because the previous paper tests were all fully marked in Welsh schools by the teachers themselves. So the point of these school assessments is to provide a short and effective assessments, easy to administer, and they're entirely formative to benefit the learner. So the elements of national comparability are about giving results on a fixed national standard for the school's benefit. It's not about performance measurements or any kind of accountability against the schools. It's up to the schools whether or not they wish to share that data with local partners, the local authorities, and so on. And so just to kind of pick up on that, our model of formative assessment is about providing information that both the teachers and the learners have access to, and is about clarifying where you are hoping to get to, where you are now, and the positive steps that you can actually take to get there. So we very much see it as being a sort of long loop feedback. It's not about diagnostic assessments in any single skill. So these aren't, say, a practice and learn test in fractions. It's about your overall capability in numeracy, for example. And just to give you an idea of how we're doing this, we're using a computer adaptive testing model where we have an algorithm which selects questions which are adjusted question by question to suit the learner's ability, so that all learners are demonstrating what they can do rather than having a deficit model of learning. And we make sure that we cover a representative sample of the curriculum, and after a suitable number of questions have been answered, or once we've reached a given measurement accuracy, we end the test and go on to provide a report. And to give you an idea of the scale of this, in our first year, say we had just one test available, one subject available in the first year, that was procedural numeracy, and we delivered 268,000 assessments or so, which was 96% of the total cohort. In 2019, we launched reading in both English and Welsh, but of course then COVID struck, and so we only had a very small number of assessments sat, and of course we've had the same impact this year, but now schools are back, we're expecting a very strong and full take up in the remaining term of this year. To give you an idea, at the sharp end, when we talk about actionable feedback, we get an individualized report, gives you a statement of where you are now, the kind of level you're going to move on to, and it gives you examples of the skills that represent the sort of the top and the bottom of your working range, and you can link through into sample questions. And when we talk about the sort of long loop of testing, it also provides feedback on the progression. So this is a progress chart through the 9 years of schooling, and basically we give these tram lines to show what the measurement accuracy is. And so we say, you know, any measurement that falls within that range is expected progress, and not to do anything drastic as a result of small movements up or down. But if you get a measurement that's well outside of this range, then it's worth having a discussion about why you've actually improved or degraded your performance a large amount. And just to give you a vague idea of the sort of thing that we do when we talk about being beyond multiple choice. So this is actually a reasoning maths question, and show how we do sort of interesting things. This starts as a 4-mark question because it's quite difficult, and it's an open entry. And then we give a range of hints if people are getting it wrong, so that we lead them into how to do the question without sort of showing them how to do it as you might in a multiple choice type question. So that's a very whistle-stop tour to the formative assessment. And now I'd like to hand over to my colleagues from Newcastle University.
Hello, so good evening from the UK. So like Gavin, we're in the UK. We're actually in the northeast of England in Newcastle, and we were the winners for the best summative assessment from the eAssessment Awards last year. So Gavin, if you'd like to progress our slides for us, please, thank you. So we'll start by giving you a really brief introduction to the Newcastle University Digital Exam Service. So as a service, we aim to deliver high-stakes summative assessments, and that's campus-based, so in-person exams, using university computer clusters. And in the last 3 years, we've also introduced using students' own devices on campus for some exams. And a key strategy for the university is summarised in the aim on the slide here. So to expand the scale and diversify the range of assessment types that we can deliver through digital exams. So in addition to traditional automatically marked digital exam questions, we've piloted, moving beyond multiple choice, digital written exams, allow listing web-based resources so that students can access them within a secure lockdown exam environment, and also a more diverse range of system marked and short answer question types. And the term non-cluster environments referred to here refers to outside of university PC clusters or computer labs, so that bring your own device element. The graph on our slide here represents the scale of our service. So it's grown from a pilot exam in 2007. In 2018-19 academic year, we delivered 140 digital exams, which is approximately 10% of all of the university's exams. So it's a large-scale service. It's used by every faculty across our diverse institution, and at all stages of taught programmes, so postgraduate and undergraduate students. And that demand's grown organically, so there's not been a top-down drive to move exams online. It's come from our academic units, from our schools. Our graph doesn't show any figures for 1920 or for the current academic year. So similarly, as Gavin described, we've been affected by the pandemic, and we haven't had any face-to-face exams on campus since the semester 1 of 1920. So we've had alternative forms of assessment taking place instead. But that said, once we're able to have large-scale on-campus exams possible again, we do expect that demand to continue growing in future, and we'll be expanding our capacity, particularly for digital written exams. And the scale and the evolution of the service has been achieved through internal partnerships of key stakeholders in the institution. So that's represented by our honeycomb diagram here. So the Learning and Teaching Development Service is the service myself and my colleague Jack are part of. And then we work with the other key services within the institution, as well as with the academic units. Particularly important is our student wellbeing service, and we partner with them to ensure that our exams are as accessible as possible for all of our students. So if you could progress our slide, please, Gavin.
So I'm just going to talk briefly about how the digital exam service fits with the national context in which we operate. So in spring 2020, JISC, who are a UK not-for-profit organisation that provide digital services and solutions to UK education, they produced a report entitled The Future of Assessment. And in this, they highlighted 5 key principles and targets for the next 5 years that higher education institutions in the UK should aspire to in relation to assessment. So in terms of how our service, in particular that movement of handwritten essay exams to a digital format, enables us to address some of these key principles. If we take authentic assessment, typing is much more likely in the workplace context than handwriting to prepare documents or reports. as well as being the mode that students are more familiar with when they're preparing other types of assessments. Allow listing allows us to access specified web resources while maintaining exam security. And again, in the workplace, students would have access to information that requires interpretation. So we're moving beyond auto-marked exams with assessment that has the potential to enhance student employability because we're assessing more authentic activities. In terms of accessibility, which Rebecca touched on, we're also able to do things like make spell check available for students who need it. Students are able to edit the written answer with no concerns about handwriting, legibility. Students with a disability who in the past may have had a requirement to type a handwritten exam now get the same experiences as their peers, which makes that assessment more inclusive. And they can use assistive technologies such as screen readers, speech recognition, and other tools. And of course, our on-campus digital exams are secure. We have the lockdown browser that ensures only students registered for modules can access the exam, and also that they have no access beyond the test or the permitted online resources. Next slide, please.
So we really want to just give you a quick flavour of some of the feedback that we've had from our students and also our colleagues about these new types of exams that we've introduced. So all students who've taken a pilot, bring your own device and or a digital written exam have had the opportunity to complete an evaluation survey. They're really positive about the experience of digital written exams compared to paper-based. So 76% rated the experience as being as good as or better than a paper-based written exam written by hand. And the reasons they give for that are really some of the things Jack's touched on. So fewer concerns about legibility, that ability to edit their work is much more familiar. The student quoted here went on to explain that their process was in writing their exam submission was much more similar to what they might be doing with written coursework. And students with specific learning difficulties who need to type their written exams are now getting the same experience as their peers. We also found they had even higher satisfaction with bring your own device, so using their own laptops to do those exams. Students prefer to use a familiar machine. I think that's particularly important for those who have additional accessibility requirements as well. And then from the perspective of our colleagues, that certainly fed into their feedback as well. So they felt that moving to digital for written exams addressed some concerns about reliability of assessment, so they're not struggling to read students' handwriting written under time pressure, but they're also able to set much more sophisticated assessments, so doing things that would evaluate a broader range of skills and learning outcomes and enhance the authenticity of their assessments under exam conditions as well. So if we can go to the next slide, thanks.
So we have some existing challenges from before COVID that we still need to address. For example, logistics at scale. So providing exam room technical support across many venues at any one time on campus is challenging. Ensuring students that don't have a suitable device or suffer device failure are catered for requires close liaison with the teams that Rebecca's already mentioned, our IT department and state service. And again, scaling that up is a challenge. In terms of some of the opportunities, so in terms of assessment types, we're able to enable students to incorporate diagrams drawn in paper into a digital response, which is a challenge and an opportunity, because it does require hardware solutions such as a webcam, which again requires that suitable device, which takes us back to the logistical issue of ensuring our students have that, or to be scanned in, which again, a logistical arrangement to make sure that scan gets into the correct digital response. And we know that some exams can't move online without that sort of process being in place. We know there's demand for other types of exams, so it might be possible in the future to whitelist desktop applications. And we're seeing developments from software providers in this area. And that would help us to increase the authenticity of our digital exams even further. And there are lessons we've learned from COVID itself over the past year. So it's allowed us to reflect on the requirements of our stakeholders. And it's become apparent that students don't all have devices, which means we really do need to visit that and see how we can make sure students have the adequate devices that they need. But we're confident that because academic staff have been able to and have experience designing, delivering and marking digital assessment, that they'll have more confidence now to move the traditional exams to a digital format. So we're quite confident that that experience, there are some positives in terms of moving our assessment to a more digital format. So yeah, final slide. We're more than happy to discuss our experience further, but we are really interested in hearing from other institutions where digital written exams are being implemented, to hear about how you're meeting some of the challenges that we have. So we encourage you to please, if you If you have experience, please contact us, digital.exams@newcastle.ac.uk, and continue the conversation with us, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for one or two questions? Why not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, Teresa. Yes, we do. I think we have time for one or two questions. So
Okay, I'll just yes. Okay, I've a couple of questions here. So my first question is for the Newcastle University team. You mentioned allow using. For what types of assessment do you use allow listing?
Thank you, Karen. Sorry, Teresa. So we've used allow listing so far. We've had one pilot exam that's made use of it, which was from our School of Computing. The module leader there had developed a modelling tool that he asked his students to use kind of as a learning resource. They've used it during teaching sessions and during some of the self-guided learning. And then he chose to allow list that during their exam as well. So they used it as a tool to help them engage with and answer some of the exam questions. We've also got kind of use cases in the pipeline from people who would have liked to introduce this year, but hopefully we'll do in future, where they would intend to allow list, for example, an article, a web page, might be a case study, something like that, that's available online that students will then make use of in answering a question. And then in future, we'd like to see functionality to be able to list things like ebooks or desktop or web-based applications. So, for example, we have quite a lot of demand for making statistical software available for students to use, but during a secure exam that kind of protects the integrity of the exam as well. So there's a whole range of use cases, and I think there's a real potential for allow listing functionality to enable that kind of authentic assessment that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I can see that. That's very interesting. Thank you. And just one question for Gavin. How has the formative assessment that you presented, how has that been used during the pandemic?
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, the usage in the disruption to education caused by the pandemic has been quite interesting, actually. Because the assessments are entirely delivered on screen. They're accessible basically on any internet connected device. So they could be delivered to learners at home. But the formative intent is to actually see what the learners can do under sort of consistent and controlled conditions. And it's to enable the learners to actually combine the results with their understanding of the learner's capabilities to sort of pilot and plan out what the learner should do next to continue their progression. And therefore, although we offered the facility to continue using the assessments at home to the schools, they actually took a policy decision led by themselves not to use them whilst in-school education wasn't possible for three main reasons, really. Firstly, it wasn't equitable for learners because they had differing access to equipment, and so you're going to give sort of favoured support basically to the most digitally enabled learners. A case of the unknown, because this is a low stakes formative assessments. There's no form of remote invigilation or anything, so their use would have been controlled, and the teachers themselves would be uncertain when they got the data back whether it was the learner they were measuring or their parents, or were they actually just sort of picking up the noise of the working conditions that learner was having to endure. So they didn't feel they could trust the data they were getting. And then, although it might inform the next steps, well, through the pandemic, the schools have been, challenged with just delivering remote teaching full stop, never mind adding the challenge and the burden of actually personalizing that learning across each of their learners within their class remotely distributed. So, although it was technically possible from a pedagogic viewpoint, it didn't make any sense. So we didn't deliver any assessments really while schools were out. But what's really significant is as soon as learners have come back to on-premises teaching, we've seen an instant uptake in the use of the assessments, because the first thing schools want to know is sort of where are our learners at, how have they spared during this time away, you know, because some learners have progressed, some haven't, and they need to know where they're at. So it's really interesting that they value having the tool for as soon as they're back in the school environment.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, and you can see our email addresses in front of you. We very much welcome any further questions you've got, or indeed any applications to join the eAssessment Association. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Rebecca and Jack, for two great ways of closing out today's program. Really informative. Looking back on the whole day, a stunning amount of information that we've had. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it as valuable and rewarding as I have. I thank you for staying with us through the course of today. I look forward to seeing you in November and exchanging information with you. A big thank you to Brian and the technical team who have delivered today's exercise. Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to our sponsors and supporters. That's Inspira, Better Examinations, Surpass TAL, UK Skills and Zero, without whom today would not have been possible. I always stand up at physical conferences where we are seeing people depart from a physical conference room with the wave of the hand and say, I hope everybody has a safe journey home. I suspect most of us are actually at home now, but I would say it nevertheless. Have a safe journey home, everybody. Stay safe through the pandemic. Good luck with it. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff. And just a couple reminders for folks. We will have the special issue of eLearn magazine that highlights presentations from this seminar, as well as our November seminar, our November conference. And then that's going to be a recurring opportunity for us for publication. So as folks have results and new innovations they'd like to share, that's going to be a publication connected with this conference. And as Jeff said, thanks to the sponsors once more. And we've just posted again the registration for November, as well as the survey link for feedback. So thanks, Jeff. Thanks to all of our speakers, and we'll see you all in November.